Hi everyone, I hope you're having a great week. This is Jenny with Jenny Lyon Digital Marketing and Virtual Assistant Services. I wanted to pop in today to talk about one of my favorite types of projects, webinars. I'm super excited to share with you some of my favorite ways to attract your audience with a webinar, and I have a couple of free workbooks too. So recently I've been creating a lot of different types of content to allow me to get closer to my audience. So I don't want you to just have to read my words, but also hear my voice, see my face. I believe that it creates a stronger connection with my audience. Is it working? To get started, I've obviously picked YouTube. I've been doing a lot of videos. I've also been doing a lot of podcasting. And with podcasting, I found it to be a fantastic way to get my name out there, my content out there. And, it's entirely audio though, and no visuals. So, it's pretty excellent for, your audience who's going out for a run or they're running errands, but not so much if you want to communicate complex ideas that require that visual component. And, sometimes on the internet, that's what you need. You kind of need that visual component. So, kind of like a visual seminar. So what is that, right? It's a webinar. So have you ever attended a webinar? Well, in short, a webinar is basically an online seminar. Well, organizing an in-person seminar does involve an incredible amount of logistics. You have to book the venue, you have to get speakers, book airfare, accommodations, it's a lot of work. Whereas creating a webinar is much more accessible. I mean, for you and your audience. I mean, after all, to present a webinar, what do you really need? You need a great microphone, a webcam, a computer, a lot of prep. But to attend a webinar, all you really need is a computer. Helps if you have a good cup of tea and a cozy blanket, but really you just need a computer. So why even create a webinar? Well, did you know one of the biggest problems for new business owners and entrepreneurs? It's being seen as an expert in their field. The longer that you're in business, the more credibility that you build. And, thankfully there is a shortcut to build your reputation as an expert online, and it's through content, right? And one of the best ways to build content is a webinar. I mean, a webinar, gives potential clients that ability to see you in person, who you are, what you can do for them. They also get to engage with you. They can ask questions about your services, and it gives you a chance to show you're an expert in your field. And it gets, it's fun. You get to show your personality a little bit. So, there are some pros and cons, but spoiler alert, the pros far outweigh the cons. So as I mentioned, the biggest pro of presenting a webinar is that it shows you as an expert in your field. Even if someone doesn't sign up, they'll see that you're presenting a webinar. They'll see your marketing out there, and, that even will reflect positively on you. They'll think to themselves, well, she must have it together. She knows what she's doing. She's going to get on a webinar and talk about it for an hour live on camera. Another hit in the pro column is that webinars can live on long after you've given them. I mean, have you heard that old phrase, nothing ever dies on the internet? Well, that goes double for valuable content, especially webinars. While there's a chance that you might present that first webinar to a limited audience, you can extend its shelf life by recording the entire thing. You can share it other places. You can break it up. You can post it on YouTube. You could repackage it into an opt-in for your email list. And, with the right marketing, that webinar that you initially presented, even if you only presented it to 20 people, it could rapidly grow into hundreds of views. And, if those people see what they like, then they might want to work with you in the future or attend a future webinar. And it really can help you gain momentum. So even if your very first presentation, your first webinar, you only get 20 people to show up, even if you retain 20% of that audience, there's a good chance that you'll be presenting to an even bigger audience at your next one. And yeah, once you get really good at webinars, then you can record them and set the whole thing up as an ever webinar. So that's right, an evergreen webinar. That way it can be constantly bringing in new leads. Now that's a great lead magnet. So the first step when you really want to dig into webinars, I always say is to watch some. You know, the best place when deciding to create a webinar is to attend a few yourself. You want to figure out what kind of webinar topics work best to connect with an audience, you know, so you want to sign up for some. There's plenty of free webinars out there, and you can probably even find some that apply to your industry. So just watching and learning the format can be so educational, especially if you're very new to it. And I've worked on, gosh, I've lost count, hundreds of webinars for my clients over the years. And if you want to see particular examples, let me know, you know, shoot me a message and I'll be delighted to share some with you. So once you've kind of got your feet wet, you kind of know what it's all about. The next step is you really need to choose a high converting webinar topic. So you want to build your webinar around a topic that's sure to boost signups and sales. So when choosing your topic, you want to start with the benefits of your webinar. What's in it for your audience? Why should they show up? You need a great topic to hook the audience and reel them in. It should be super relevant, and it needs to speak to your audience, you know, offers them some sort of a solution for a challenge that they're experiencing right now. And it needs to be actionable so that they leave with some immediate results or very, you know, a small win. And of course, you want it to be irresistible. You don't want them to pass it up. You want them to see it and sign up and show up. And if you aren't sure what topic's going to bring your audience in, then I always suggest, you know, check in to see what your audience is already interested in, what's already popular with your audience. A really great resource for this is your website analytics. You can look through your blog content to see, are there particular blogs that are getting the most views and traffic or the most engagement? You can dig into your social media insights to see what type of posts are getting the most engagement. And you can even ask your audience. I mean, I personally love to hear what my clients or even prospects are really interested in learning. And I always say those questions that you get asked over and over again, those are great topics for a webinar. And once you know what kind of webinar content your audience craves, then you can really dial in and pick a topic that's going to score a high level of engagement with them. And then the next step, once you've kind of nailed in on your topic, is you need to give your webinar a really catchy title. So when you create any piece of content, really, whether it's a webinar, a blog post, an opt-in, I mean, anything, you really need a title that's going to be catchy. You know, when you're creating your webinar, always refer back to the title to make sure that you're on topic. You know, it can be really easy to go off on a tangent, of course, but you want to always relate, you know, to the overall subject matter. So you want to definitely keep yourself on course. And a webinar isn't like an online class where you want to deeply delve into a number of different points. You know, it really needs a rock solid focus. The title needs to do more than just say what your webinar is about. It needs to be eye-catching. So, for example, I've seen webinars titled things like growing your resume writing business, you know, but that's not really catchy. You need to dial it in even more. Something like how to triple your resume writing business in less than a year while working part-time. That will garner much more attention and interest from potential clients. Then the next step is to really get into researching, writing, you know, creating your script and starting to think about your slide deck. So if you're going to present the webinar, you first need to research the topic. Even if you're an expert in your field, I always say it pays off to make sure that you do have some resources on hand, because people ask questions and it's nice to have those available. And research can be a pain. I know it definitely can. So we do a lot of research for clients. So of course, if you need virtual assistant help, let us know. We can save you countless hours putting together scripts and slide decks, and of course, setting up the entire webinar. But once you've completed all that research, then you can take it and start narrowing down the topic. So there's two schools of thought when writing a script for your webinar. So I have some clients who, you know, they're very comfortable on camera and they like to kind of have their talking points, you know, usually in bullet form, but they kind of wing it, you know, and they deliver the webinar off the top of their head. And, you know, that really works well for people who, you know, are super comfortable on camera. Maybe they teach or perform, you know, but for some people like myself, I like to have things mapped out. So I prefer to have, my entire script written out. That way I ensure that I don't miss any important points. It keeps me on track, but it also keeps my nerves calmed. So writing out a script, again, it can be a bit time consuming, but it definitely helps make sure the presentation goes off without a hitch. And in my opinion, it's a really good thing to have. But there's also something else that might even be a little bit more important, your slide deck. So step 5 is it's all about the slide deck. So again, I've worked on hundreds of webinars over the years, and every single one of them has been different, but I can tell you from experience, the most successful ones have always had a very polished visual component. So webinars with slides, I've gone to some webinars where the slides, are very plain, and you're sitting on the same slide for an extended period of time. And, the next thing I know, I find myself multitasking, or, I'm looking, what's happening over here? Kind of gets a bit off track, whereas with professionally designed slides that have graphics and fonts that really keep your eyes glued to the screen, that's where you want to be. I really prefer a captive audience over one that is multitasking. So when designing a webinar, it isn't just a matter of creating the individual slides, but you have to keep the entire presentation in mind. You want it to be very cohesive. You don't want, one slide to have, a beachy theme, and then the next one to have a completely different theme. You don't want it to be visually jarring to your audience in any way. You want it to be very cohesive, but you do want to grab them with really great graphics, and not too much content. You're going to give them the content. You don't need slides with a ton of content on it. And my number one secret for slide decks is more really is better. I always recommend to my clients to have at least one slide per minute, if not more. Changing slides on a quick basis really does keep your audience engaged. And speaking of engagement, make sure that you're asking your audience questions, doing polls, raise your hand throughout to really keep that engagement going. So then we move into the fun part, filling your webinar seats. So I've found that Facebook ads will be the best way to fill your webinar seats with people who are generally interested in what you have to offer. But that's a whole blog, video, podcast for another day. There's a lot of free techniques that you can use though to fill your webinar seats. So I always recommend, of course, by inviting your existing email list, and you want to invite them early and send them a few reminders for anyone who didn't sign up the first time. And when it comes to that email invite, remember to craft a subject line that's going to not only entice them to open it, but to sign up with the registration link as well. And of course, you definitely want to update social media, your social media posts, stories, maybe do a Facebook Live, update even the covers on your social media accounts to really highlight the webinar with the webinar topic and, a link for them to register right there. And then comes presenting the webinar. So one of the biggest challenges facing most of my clients with the first webinar, especially, is stage fright. And I get it, me too. Don't believe me? Well, when was the last time that 100 people or more were there looking at you, ready for your attention? 100%, they're focused on you, hanging on every word. Are you nervous yet? making myself nervous. Don't worry, that's supernatural. Stage fright, it's even a problem for experienced public speakers and actors, not all of them, but I read a story one time. Donny Osmond used to suffer from stage fright, and so much so that he'd have panic attacks on stage while performing Joseph in the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Can you believe that? So as you can tell, he got over it. So, even if you do suffer from stage fright, it's something that you can get through. And even though you won't be getting up, right in front of people to speak, hosting a webinar can trigger those fears and insecurities. So Don't worry, have your talking points, don't focus on what your voice sounds like. Everybody says that, my voice, why does it sound like that? Your voice never sounds, the way that you think it does, and if you practice too, that's another thing I always say is, to practice. I practice with my clients, so they start to feel more comfortable. At first, they're a little stiff and a little, and after a couple of times, you start to feel more confident, and it's not as scary as you think it's going to be. And step 8 is to make sure that you have tech support. So the key to making sure that nothing goes wrong during your webinar is to confirm that everything's working before your webinar. So that includes, checking your audio, checking your computer, checking your slide deck. Really, you should set everything up well in advance and do a practice run, because it never fails that something doesn't work. Never, always, camera doesn't work, the microphone isn't picking up sound. There's always something. So you definitely want to prepare. And what happens if in the middle of your webinar, the slide deck suddenly fails, even if you did practice? Well, it's not the end of the presentation, not at all, especially if you have like a virtual assistant on with you to help with the tech support. And I most always go through and do tech support with all of my clients on their webinars. It's, it's not only great because a lot of times the audience will have questions. Maybe they can't log in, they can't hear, they don't understand how it works. And instead of chatting you while you're live, I give them my information so they can contact me directly, and behind the scenes, I can help them with any type of tech issue that they're having. So you presented your first webinar now. So what's next? Well, if it was your very first webinar, then chances are that you made some mistakes, and that's a good thing. Mistakes are how you improve and become better. So you need to learn from the lessons that you experience, and that way when you do the webinar again, it'll even be more successful. So you want to lay out the big general questions. What worked? What didn't work? Is there something that you knew could have gone better? Is there something that surprised you that it went so well? How could you improve it overall? And, did you close the sale? What did that look like? How great was your call to action at the end? An email survey at the end of the webinar is also a great way to really find out what your audience thought of the webinar. So it's a good way to get some testimonials and social proof about it as well, and what their overall experience was. And you can even entice them to fill out a survey by offering them a free download, a free extra download. That way you can get some anonymous feedback to improve next time. And then of course you can repurpose your webinar. So you put so much effort and time and money into building this webinar, so you can repurpose the content. So unlike when the webinar was going out live, now you can edit it, you can cut pieces that you want to share, you can even repurpose it into a blog post or a series of blog posts, or graphics for social media. There's a lot of things that you can do there. There's a lot of really great nuggets that you can take to share everywhere. So what did we learn about webinars? Well, a webinar, it's basically just an online seminar. It's all in the name. You want your webinar to position you as an expert in your field. Webinars really can deepen that connection between you and your audience. You can use webinars as content for the future. And you should start by watching a few webinars before you decide exactly what you want to create for your own. And choosing the right topic and the right name is super important. And then you'll dig into researching and writing yourself a script and making your slide deck as compelling as possible. And you're going to rely on that script to calm your nerves when presenting, have someone else like a virtual assistant run all of the tech for you. And then at the very end, you're going to reflect on the experience, get feedback from your audience, and then spin your webinar off into a lot of different types of content. So has this got you interested in creating a webinar for your business? If so, you might be thinking, this is all great, but how do I even start? Well, I've got you covered. I have not just one, but 2 free downloads for you today. I have a ultimate webinar launch planner. It's a workbook. And I also have a ultimate step-by-step webinar checklist for your virtual assistant. So you can grab the ultimate webinar launch planner at jennylyon.com/webinar and the virtual assistant checklist at jennylyon.com/VA webinar. And of course, if you'd like to get in contact with me, if you need any help with your webinar journey, please do. Feel free to schedule a free consultation. I'm always happy to help. I hope that you found this information helpful. I hope that you dig in and get your first webinar out there to the world. Have a great day.